but you began to feel that people would do anything in the world other than miss a day of shooting because something was happening and you didn't quite know what.
My dad, as I think you know, soon after the movie took his life, and he did it with a gun. So I now am doing nothing but Westerns for the next 5 years. Knew nothing about post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I am hearing guns all the time.
I managed to get through that. I was terrified of him all the way, scared to death. I didn't realize until much later in my career with him that he was so off balance that the only way he could have any equilibrium was keep everyone up more off balance than he was.
The Army rode the railroad now.
Where's the double for Paul Harper? And I heard the assistant Coleman say, well, he's not ready. Why is he not ready? He wouldn't put the beard on. Well, fire him. He said, something about it really ticked me off. And I went around this rock and I stood right in front of him and I tore the beard off and I said, you bet your ass you can fire me, but get me a car right now.
Sam was a difficult person, but I think he was under a great deal of pressure. People didn't treat him as perhaps they should have.
When you side with a man, you stay with him. And if you can't do that, you're like some animal. You're finished.
If I was getting paid $50 million for that movie, I couldn't have felt better. I mean, the crew was so great. The Peckinpah was smiling. And Phil Feldman and Sam, all of them invited me out to dinner.
And there's a bunch of people standing around in the room, and Sam is drinking Martell brandy, and nobody's saying a thing. And Bill Pierce looked around the room, and he said, well, if you guys are standing around and not doing anything, I've got lots to do. And Sam sits up and says, I'm going with that guy right now, and the rest of you sons of bitches can follow me.
You might as well face it. You're just not the writer you was a few years back.
I need it, Buck. It's my hometown.
The Wild Bunch, the Bible, because we watch it over and over again. It is so rich in texture and levels of meaning and character, and it just doesn't get much better than The Wild Bunch. Your part, I can visualize it now, where you and Strother Martin are running around claiming which dead body's boots you got to keep. I mean, what a realistic, shocking moment that was in the movie. Not just the shootout, but then to see you scavengers arguing over booty like that. Was that in the script?
Part of it was in the script, but all of you know Strother Martin. And when you're working with Strother, you're fighting for your life. So we just sort of winged it as we went along. But it was one of those things that we had started to work like, well, I guess a week before the rest of the company showed up. We're doing the shootout in the town with Bud and the rest of them. And we had a little trouble getting the shot, and finally we got it. And we came bursting out, and we went through the fight, and Sam never cut into it. He just let it go. Now, in the meantime, Bill Holden, a fair beginner in our business, had showed up, and Sam had put him in a chair right next to the camera. And we did the stuff, and as soon as Sam said cut, Holden jumped up and he started moving away. And Sam says, where are you going, Bill? Bill turned back and he pointed to Strother to me and he says, is this the way you're going to shoot the rest of the picture? And Sam said, yes. He said, I'm going home and study. And
your part, you were with Robert Ryan's bounty hunters, basically scavengers going after the bunch, and the cross cutting between the two. But you guys were like really dirty and scuzzy looking and had dialogue to match your characters.
Well, it was typecasting. They said, right? But before you put Sam too high up, let me get you to where you understand. Gordy, are you here? Where are you? Oh, you're right here. No wonder I can't see you. Do I still owe you money,
This
for
is
Christ's
Gordon
sake?
Dawson, everybody.
No? Good to see you, babe. Okay, we've done a pickup early. Sam decided to do a close-up, do a master on a shot that was going to be at night. We're in the daytime. We can't get the work that we're doing anyway, but he decides to do it, and so we do the shot. Now, about 2 months later, we're doing the close-up, Strother, Bob, Paul, and myself. And we do it, and we did it first with Bob, and we picked up Paul, picked up Strother, and they got to me. We did that. When we got through, Sam said nothing, and we knew we were in deep caca. And we just sort of waited around, and Sam turned to Lucian. He said, what do you think, Lucian? Is it okay? Yeah, it's okay, Sam. You know, everybody hit the keys are fine. Okay, and he talked to, you weren't there, I don't think, this particular day, but he talked to somebody in the department. He said, you know, how is it? What's fine, Sam? And he went all the way around everybody, and finally we all kept waiting, and he finally got to the props. And he said, Tony, do you see what? Yeah, you know. But he said, how did you like it? He said, what were you talking about? How do I like it? It's fine, Sam, you know, everything. Sam said, how many beans has LQ got on his plate? Now, this is 2 months after the master shot. And Tony said, how the hell do I know how many beans he's got on his plate? Sam said he's got 13. He had 7 when we shot the long shot. You're fired. Now, unlike most shows where if you want to, you can go in and look at the rushes, Sam never allowed any actor to look at the rushes. He just kept everybody away from it. It was a good thought, because if you were doing something wrong, you would change it, you thought. But now you've started off something on day 1, you're on day 60, and you're a different character, although you're in the same clothes. So he didn't want that, but it began to leak out to us from the editor, which you won't go into at the moment, who was taking a look. He was cutting the picture as we went. They were out at the country club. The country club was 9 holes of golf of mud. That was the high class end of it. And we had the fight every every Saturday night at 11 o'clock. So all the stuntmen showed up in the fight, and we all went to jail. I mean, quite literally. I must have been in jail 13 or 14 times on the show. Everybody else did too. That's the way Sam ran it. But you began to feel that people would do anything in the world other than miss a day of shooting, because something was happening and you didn't quite know what. But it was happening, and that's for me. In talking to the rest of the crew and the cast, that's pretty much the feeling. Something was afoot. We didn't know what it was, but it was fun to be a part of it.
What do you know about the Wild Bunch that none of us know?
Well, I can tell you many stories, but first I'd like to say, think back to 1968. We didn't have telephones. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have faxes. We didn't have the internet. We were in Torreon and Paras, a little motel with an office about the size of 2 telephone booths. There was a telephone there that if I wanted to use the hotel telephone, I had to make an appointment.
Ooh.
And usually the time they gave me, we were out on the set. It was a time, think about it, Martin Luther King was killed. LBJ and the war, Vietnam. And here we were, like a military being sent to Mexico. It was not the type of Mexico, it was not the accommodations of what one would think they have today. That's where I wanted to start. I want to put you in that position.
I'm thirsty already. But from what I understand, there was a lot of drinking going on. How was that to deal with as an assistant director, wanting people when you needed them, and were they always prompt and always there?
Yes, you know, I've heard since that there was a lot of drinking going on, but it wasn't during the day, it wasn't on the set, it was in the evening. It was many of the crew and actors going out to the local bars and drinking and getting drunk. And I think it was part of their celebration from the difficult days of shooting in Mexico, hot weather, difficult situations. You know, we had huge cameras, huge lights. It wasn't as easy as it is today. It was challenging.
Sam's last movie, the one prior to that, well, he'd been fired from Cincinnati Kid because he was shooting, according to Marty Ransohoff, a black and white porno movie, and he says, get rid of this guy. And Major Dundee had been not successful. And here he is in Mexico with, it sounds like complete freedom because nobody can get to him. How were you brought into the fold with that?
Well, first, I think that he was under a lot of pressure because of his previous films, and he was in Mexico where he had a great deal of freedom. He had a very supportive producer, Phil Feldman, and he had a new administration back at Warner Brothers. The Kinney administration had bought Warner Brothers. So those were the challenges. Sam was a difficult person, as I'm sure many before me have talked about, but I think he was under a great deal of pressure. And I think that people didn't treat him as perhaps they should have. Sam was difficult. Sam was very difficult to me. He would say, he would be on the set and he'd kind of talk through his teeth and he'd say, Howard, and I'd show up and it'd say, when we were here scouting, now I hadn't been to many of those locations scouting, I told you that I wanted this area greened in. And I had learned by that time to say, coming in. Because you couldn't defend yourself. You couldn't say, no, I've never been here, Sam.
Or you'd be gone.
Or you didn't tell me that. And talking about that, I was the only one in production that didn't get the boot. The first assistant director was fired. Everybody was fired. There was 70% of the crew was fired for one reason or another. And I never knew if it was Sam giving the orders or Bill Farrella, who was the production guy, or even Phil Feldman. But the change kept coming, and it was challenging.
We're not getting rid of anybody. We're going to stick together just like it used to be. When you side with a man, you stay with him. And if you can't do that, you're like some animal. You're finished.
What is the job of an assistant director?
There's a first assistant director and a second assistant director, and their primarily job is to set the background, work with the director. The director says he wants such and such. But prior to even shooting, the assistant director would schedule, break down, usually create the budget, break down the schedule, work with the director on the schedule, how you're going to shoot, and make sure that cars and horses and trucks and all of that were available for the next day's shooting. And that's, the assistant director would create the call sheet that would go out to all the crew members. And then they'd create the production report at the end of the day. But they worked with, and there was tons of paperwork, but they'd work with the actors. They'd make sure the actors were made up at 6 a.m. in the morning. They would make sure that they had transportation to the set. Assistant director is really, in a way, a gopher. But there's a great deal of responsibility to what they do. It's a great, great job, and I'm glad I did it for many years.
Well, that film is a classic, and for you to have not just lived through that, but to have not been fired is, you should have gold medals. And because of the way Sam worked. And let's take, for instance, the train robbery sequence. I heard that that was almost improvised. It was set up in advance, but he would make split-second changes in it to make it work, and it's such an effective sequence.
The Army rode the railroad now.
How difficult is that for everybody?
It's difficult if you're not prepared. Now, we always have a script to go by. We know what we're going to shoot that day. And oftentimes, Sam would send information to us that day or even the day or 2 days before and say, these are the changes or these are the shots that I want to get. And, because of 1968, sometimes the changes were typed on onion skin. We'd get something that's been mimeographed. If our audience even knows what a mimeograph machine
This audience
is.
would.
Most of the changes in advance came from the studio on blue or pink pages. But you have to be prepared for Sam to make those changes. Sam did make changes, but I've worked with other directors that made more challenging changes, where suddenly they wanted something that wasn't available. Sam was pretty good with that. And as difficult as Sam was, I will say that when the picture was over and he returned months later back to the studio, he came up and he gave me a hug. He was a different guy. And we've heard that same type of story about Henry Hathaway and other tough directors, Otto Preminger, whatnot.
And what do you think was the cause of Sam's downfall later? I mean, he made wonderful films that have elements, but the consistency that he was able to accomplish in The Wild Bunch, it's a masterpiece. And everything about it works, and the performances by everybody down to the smallest part. It's all very strong. It holds together. Lou Lombardo, I think, was the editor, did a wonderful job weaving the new look that we got for a Western. We had never seen anything like that before.
No, we hadn't. Sam used a couple of cameras all the time. He'd shoot a scene and then oftentimes reshoot it slightly different or from a different angle. That many directors will do. He had a great script to begin with. His downfall, I don't know. Tired, drugs, alcohol. I don't know the answer to that.
When you were working on the film and you saw so many people coming and going, did you have any inclination at all that it was going to end up being what it became, which is a classic?
Yes, well, look at the talent you had. William Holden and Borgnine and Robert Ryan and Strother Martin and LQ and on and on and on. There was talent there. There was talent there even if the director didn't have to talk to them. But the director did talk to them. So you had, even though the crew kept coming and going, you had a great crew here. You had a great cameraman, Lucian Ballard. He had a great crew around him. He was there. He knew how to shoot Westerns. And Sam knew how to shoot Westerns. And I think Sam, I don't know how prepared Sam really was. He knew what the story was all about. He knew what the theme was about. But he would come to work, usually the last one after we were all there sitting and waiting, and then he'd stall. He might take an hour or two before he actually called the actors into the set because he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. Case in point, one day we're shooting in the steam room, if you remember that scene. And he came to me and he said, go get Eddie Carrera, the art director. And I got in a car and I drove out. It must have been 20 miles where Eddie was working on another set. I said, Eddie, Sam wants you. We both drove back in different cars. And Eddie said, Sam, what is it you want? And there was a table about this size. And he said, I want this moved from this wall to that wall. And that was about 8 feet, if that. But it gave Sam time to figure out how he was going to shoot that shot. And I could tell you 25 stories exactly like that, where Sam stalled. He took time, let's put it that way, time to figure out how he was going to shoot a scene with his actors and placement of his cameras.
Boy, he was a genius at the way he had everything moving. And that scene, that's the scene in the steam room where Warren's going to get married.
I want you to meet my fiance.
Right. Yeah, the Gorch brothers, here they come.
Yeah.
That was a wild sequence to film, too. It looked like there's probably a lot of outtakes on that, wouldn't there be?
Yeah, Sam did a lot of coverage, and there was a very small room. I mean, you couldn't move the walls.
Had to move that table 8 feet.
That's right. in a 10 by 10 room. Made out of mud, bricks, with a low ceiling.
Well, did you come across Sam later in your career as you were rising up into your own productions? Did you see Sam later?
Never saw Sam other than that one last time at Warner Brothers. I did do an insert shot with him on The Wild Bunch months later with a horse and a leg.
What was that?
Well, I don't know if it was ever used, but there was a scene, Edmund O'Brien was shot in the leg. And then when we saw him again, Sam said, "Whoa, it's the other leg." And I made the mistake, and I went to the script supervisor, who was my roommate at the time, Creighton Smith, and I said, which leg is it? I'm sure he was shot in the right leg. And Sam, and he was smart enough to stay away and not even answer. But if you look at the movie, he's shot in one leg, and he appears at the very end when he meets with Robert Ryan again. And the other leg is bandaged, but that was Sam. You know, Sam would say, again, I learned, Sam says, we're out with the bounty hunters, and they have pack mules, and we shoot the shot, and he comes over to me and he says, "You had one too many horses." And I went to Tony the wrangler, and I said, how many pack horses have we been using? Tony says 5. Sam says 4. Well, the answer's 4. But I told Tony always to have 5 horses there, because you never knew if Sam was going to ask for 5. That's the job of the assistant director.
Oh, man. It's a job nobody would want.
You're 25 years old, and you're a go-getter.
You know, with all those big stars, too. How exciting was that for you?
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
I came to core school to be married, and that's what I'm going to be, married.
Mariette Hartley, refreshingly different with her red hair and freckles.
So honored to be here, and I was so honored. It was my first film. I'd never done a movie. I'd never done film. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about film acting. You know, I still don't.
Well, no one would know from watching that performance. It's not only were you great in that, but the reviews for you in particular were...
They were pretty wonderful.
I came to core school to be married, and that's what I'm going to be, married.
Mariette Hartley, refreshingly different with her red hair and freckles. Recklessly pitted one suitor against another.
Looks like the girl he's been going down the mountain to see. I'll say one thing, she's sure worth the trip. Looks like a warm one.
Because that was not an easy role either. You know, R.G. Armstrong.
Oh,
he was pretty powerful.
R.G. Yeah, and he was definitely an actor studio actor, and about which I knew nothing. I came from classical theater. I came from Shakespeare. I've been doing Shakespeare since I was 10. So being roughed up by those guys was really terrifying to me. I was scared to death most of the time. It was funny because I met Jimmy Drury at an airport, I don't know, a while back. And I said, you know, you terrified me, Jimmy. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you and all of the Hammond brothers. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, I was so in love with you. I said, why the hell didn't you tell me that? I mean, it sure would have made it a lot easier for me because...
Well, I think Warren Oates was in love with you too, and all of those Hammond brothers.
I didn't know that either. Anyway, yeah, because Warren and I worked a lot together. Was the last thing we did was Barcaro? No, we did also a series based on the African Queen. Yeah, and I have a tendency to swear a lot. He didn't. He was very embarrassed by it, that I would dressed as I was.
The marriage sequence, when you first are writing in to meet the Hammond brothers, and then the actual wedding that was taking place, there was such an authenticity to that was different for Westerns of that time.
I guess you would use the word thank Sam for that. He had such an incredible vision about the piece. But I was going through that kind of thing in my life, and it was the first time I actually was aware of how I could use my life for that. Mm-hmm. I was in a marriage that was not particularly friendly. It was violent. And so being there with those brothers who passed me from, you know, a pair of arms to a pair of arms to a pair of arms, and then the terror of the rape that happened, it was so, I can feel it now. I mean, it was so terrifying to me. And I knew that I was going home to that same kind of behavior. And Jenny Jackson, who played the head of the bar. I don't know if everybody
She was
remembers.
this bigger than life and bigger than life.
Yes, she was. She made her own dresses, and because I don't know if you expected this kind of a personal revelation, but I don't have much of a chest. I have shoulder blades, but I have myself. But Jenny had, I dressed with her actually. We shared a dressing room at one point. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. Or like those in my life. And it was like, whoa, wow. And I knew what she did with them because she had her dresses made particularly for the size of her breasts, sizes of her breasts. And do you remember? Does anybody remember those in the movie? They were triangles, right? They were satin triangles, and I mean, it was like some kind of machine. She would lean over and she would actually scoop her breasts into those triangles, and then she'd pop up like that. But it was interesting. I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. Jenny was married to a guy named Diamond Jim. At least she said she was married to him. And he had a place up in Vegas. He was one of those, you know, roulette guys. I didn't even know what the hell the name of those things were. He was walking in front of me, and he said, "How are you doing, kid?" And I said, and I never told anybody what was going on at home. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Not really. I'm going home, and sometimes it isn't really pleasant." And he said, "Just remember," and now I had never heard this. I was 21. I'd never heard this. He said, "Things are darkest before dawn." And I have to tell you that this complete, very sweet stranger saved my life that night. It was an amazing thing. But to be able to use that part of my life in that scene. And it wasn't just what was happening, it was the feelings that came up as they were happening, take after take after take. And then RG, forget about it. I mean, good Lord, when he started slapping me, oh my God.
He's very intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, in Shakespeare, you don't do that. You come out and you say to be or not to be, and that's it, right?
But in this movie, something
ahead.
that
Yeah.
Shakespeare didn't have, he had two of the greatest heroes, Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea, to protect you. So was that comforting? Was that exciting for you? Were you aware of their status in the business at the time?
I knew nothing about them.
Wow.
I came from Westport, Connecticut. We had one movie house, the Fine Arts Theater in Westport. I watched things like The Red Shoes. And she was the only person I ever wanted to be. It was Morris Shearer.
And making the outstanding debut of this or any other year, a lovely red-headed girl graced with all the talents, Moira Shearer.
My mother, I remember, bought me some red shoes when I was doing ballet. It didn't help at all. Remember what happened to Morris Shearer in the red shoes, wearing the red shoes? I don't think my mother took it quite to that place. But anyway, I never jumped off of any balcony. But no, I knew nothing about Westerns. I mean, I really didn't. And I am so in love with them now. My dad, as I think you know, soon after the movie took his life, and he did it with a gun. So I now am doing nothing but Westerns for the next 5 years. Knew nothing about post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I am hearing guns all the time. And I'm ending up in fetal positions in these fake houses, those cottages that has no back but has a front and corners, and I got through what I had to get through with all of these kind of guys that were there.
What was the breakthrough for you, feeling with that emotional stress? What was the moment that you said, I can get past this? I can get past the gun, the fetal position, the intensity that I'm living with, and to embrace life?
It took me a long time. I mean, my mission, should I choose to accept it, was to live. I didn't have a lot of life around me. And I just kept working and working and working and putting one foot in front of another, one foot in front of another. And suddenly, I mean, finally, it all kind of, and I was in therapy. I know there are a lot of cowboys out here that probably don't believe in therapy, but...
They use guns instead.
Yeah. And I'm one of those Southern belles that learned a lot about therapy. And I really had to learn a lot about myself. But I remember I was terrified doing Ride the... But in the middle of Ride the High Country, I knew, mostly probably because of Joel and Randy, that this was a very special film. I had never seen The Westerner. I've since had met Brian Keith and adored him. And then when I saw it for the first time with my father beside me, and it said, "And introducing Mariette Hartley," oh, I can still feel it. And he put his hand on my arm, and he said, "Well, kiddo, you did it." And it was a very, very special moment.
How did Sam treat his stuntmen?
I'm going to give you a little different perspective on Sam than the actors did, because they dealt with him in a different way. From watching what I saw on The Wild Bunch was anybody that got too close to Sam, I'm speaking of stunt people mainly, if you became a personal friend or if you tried to associate with him, you didn't last very long. I mean, eventually you got fired or something. So I'd say, "Good morning, Mr. Peckinpah," and "Good night, Mr. Peckinpah," and I went home, and I didn't have nothing to do with Sam except on the set. I think I went to one birthday party, which was for him on Pat Garrett, the Billy Kid. That's the only time socially I was around him, and I think that's why I lasted as long as I did. He fired me about third or fourth day I worked for him. There was another actor there by the name of Paul Harper, who's yet passed away. And I for some reason, was doubling him at this particular time. And he had a full beard, a mustache, long hair, curls. And I can't remember the sequence, but all those guys were in it. And for 2 days, they kept putting this beard on me. And, you know, what they were using at that time was spirit gum. And this guy come up with this 2-inch brush with a quart jar full of spirit gum, and he'd paint your face and slap this beard on. And I wore this beard for about 2 days. It never worked. So the third day, they come to put it on me, and I said, "In no way. I got all the wardrobe. I got the wig. I got everything. You ain't going to put that beard on me." So here come the head guy, the head makeup guy, the head first assistant. Everybody came over and said, "You're going to get fired." I said, "Well, maybe so, but I ain't going to put it on. I got everything else on. I can put it on in 5 minutes. If you can't give me 5 minutes, well, you know." Well, this is the part that everybody else didn't talk about. Everybody in production was so scared of Sam. They were scared of him as a grizzly bear. You know, I mean, they didn't want to futz with him. So anybody that was on the picture, in my recollection, if you were there, you came to the set. If you came to the set, you got dressed, you got ready, because they didn't know where he was going to go or what he was going to do for sure. So they wanted everybody ready all the time. And I actually went 2 more days without the beard. It never worked. They were still in that sequence. Then about halfway through the 3rd day, they called for us. You know, Sam wanted, they were going to do a ride into the scene or something they wanted. So I went right up, and the guy started putting the beard on. I was right behind a big old rock, and Sam was on the other side of the rock. And the beard was on. And I heard him, he said, "Where's so-and-so? Where's the double for Paul Harper?" And I heard the assistant Coleman say, "Well, he's not ready. Why is he not ready? He wouldn't put the beard on." "Well, fire him." He said, and I never did this before in my life, and I never did it after. But something about it really ticked me off. And I went around this rock, and I stood right in front of him, and I tore the beard off, and I said, "You bet your ass you can fire me, but get me a car right now." And I wouldn't get out of his face for a few seconds. Finally, I think Coleman or somebody pulled me away, and I thought, well, I'm going home, you know, for sure. He didn't send me home. He kept me the rest of the picture, and after the picture was over, he came up and he said, "You work on every picture I ever do from here on." And I thought, oh, yeah, sure. But that was one promise he kept. He called me every time. Sometimes I wasn't available, but I did work on 6 pictures with him after that. I think he liked me. I don't know. Him and I were talking one day or something. I don't know. That didn't happen very often, but something come up about the Wild Bunch. He said, "Oh, wasn't that great?" He said, "You remember when you were on the train, you got shot?" I went down there to be a soldier on the train. Got a shot off the front of the thing, and then I wound up doubling all these guys and whatnot. But Sam was going on and on, and finally he looked at me and he said, "Did you ever see the Wild Bunch?" I said, "No." I said, "Sam, I haven't seen any of your pictures." And he said, "I'll fix that." So he called Warner Brothers or wherever and had them send it down. And he rented a theater there I think we were in some Mexican town down there, Durango or somewhere. And he said, "You got to come. You got to see this." So I went, and it was a bad print. And he went off in the theater. And I don't think I enjoyed the picture that time, you know, because, you know, Sam, those who do know him, he could be rather vulgar at the time. So anyway, later on I saw the picture many times, and being a stunt guy and whatnot, I thought it was great. I thought all the bullet fix and all the blood gore was just great.
You know, for my first movie, you must understand that I became friends with Bill Holden. He got me in my second picture, Bridget Remargan. I did 4 pictures with Ben. Dear friend. I did with Struther, and he'd come to my daughter's birthday party. What a sweet man he was. Dub Taylor stayed up all night with me, helping me memorize Yes, We Shall Gather at the River, because I had a hell of a time with songs. Well, dialogue too. Anyway, Dub, God, what an honor it was to know him. All these guys. Ernest Borgnine was like a father to me, too. And I don't know how lucky an actor can be to be in his first movie with all these great, God, they're my heroes. They still are. Now I'm as old as him. But
he's older.
I got to go to the reading the next morning. Peckinpah liked to read. We all sitting around a table, and this is a true story. Now, Warren Oates hadn't shown up yet, and I start daydreaming. Maybe he won't show up, and I'll get to play that part. My first movie, what do I know? And we were reading around a table, and of course I'm into it, you know. And Sam said, "Wait a minute." He said, "Eddie," he says, "is that the way you're gonna do it?" He said, "No, Sam, I didn't know you were." So let me see something. Legends. Yeah, I'll show you legends. And he said, okay, that's enough. But anyway, he was scared that Eddie wasn't going to do it.
Hey, Frank, you know what I hear? I hear they got one of those things up north that can fly. That was a balloon, you damned old fool.
In the film, you were squibbed up like nobody had ever been done before. That's, people don't realize that, but when the squibs go off, that sometimes is a little painful.
Well, my first day there, I was a nervous wreck. I'd never heard of Peckinpah. You got to remember, it's 68. And thank God I hadn't. Because I squibbed up 26 times. I'd never heard of a squib. They had me in a truck with wires going up my legs, up my butt, up my other legs. And because I'd gone to actor studio just to observe, I wanted to feel it. Bad move. No T-shirt. So when we started shooting, I got shot in the leg and in the shoulder and in the leg, and then I go down. Now they covered the camera, you know, with because I've got to shoot camera left, right, and center, and so hell, I can't see nobody there because I'm gonna fire that way. People got on these white things and 26 squibs, and I think, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna go to the moon. And Sam was in a little corner here off camera, and I was supposed to shoot camera left, camera right, and camera center. So he hollered action. I shot camera left, camera right, and just as soon as I was pulling the trigger, a piece of squib came out of the wood and caught me above the eyelid. And I heard Sam say, "He's hit." And I said, "Oh, God, my first movie, and I'm going to be Sammy Davis Jr." who became one of my dearest friends, by the way, Sammy. I told him that story. And Sam was right there. And, you know, it bled a little. But, you know, when you get cut above here, it damn sure bleeds. And so he said, "Okay, that's a wrap. Let's... this will be the first thing we hit in the morning." Well, me, I said, "No, sir, I just soon finish it now." He said, "You all right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." "So what do you want to drink?" "Anything." Pop that tequila down. Now, we did it again, and they put in half loads, and it didn't work because I wasn't reacting to half loads. And so anyway, we did it. And right after it was over, Mexican crew gave me a hand. Roy Sickner come up and hugged me, said, "You've made me look like $1 million." And if I was getting paid $50 million for that movie, I couldn't have felt better. I mean, the crew was so great. The Peckinpah was smiling. And Phil Feldman and Sam, all of them invited me out to dinner. So they pulled a cab up. I told this to Lee Marvin, another dear friend, this story. They backed the cab up, and I was getting ready to go out, but that thing kept clapping. As soon as I got in the cab to drive me back to change clothes to go back and meet them for dinner, I started crying, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I mean, all the way from there to where Dub Taylor was waiting on me, I couldn't stop crying. I think what Lee said was, I'd had these wires going up me. My first movie, I pleased somebody. I did something I never thought I could do, act. That's a damn true story.
How did you go about defining the costumes? Does a costumer normally just get the script first, or do you meet with the director?
Well, in that instance, I'd already done Major Dundee, so I already knew what it like to be in the toilet in the costume department, because they fired about 6 or 7 costumers on that by the time I got there. And I had done all the aging for that back in the studio, and then it was sent down there. So he brought me down there. He said, "Get me the guy who did this aging," because they were using streaks and tips and hairspray and stuff like that. So that's how I met him. And I managed to get through that. I was terrified of him all the way, scared to death. I didn't realize until much later in my career with him that he was so off balance that the only way he could have any equilibrium was keep everyone more off balance than he was. So that was his game. And later, when I got producing with him and stuff, he would say, "Okay, that guy's on the bus." And I'd say, "Come on, Sam, we got the 1, 2, 3 game. That's 1." He says, "Okay." And the next day he says, "Okay, that's 2." And if he was really pissed off, he'd say, 1, 2, 3, he's on the bus. You know. So it was a rodeo with him all the time. On the Wild Bunch, fortunately, having experienced Major Dundee, I think my department was the only one that wasn't in the toilet, the only one that wasn't fired. The prop man, I know when we were on the stage going through customs to bring everything down, I had 180 hampers or something. He had all of his ammo laid out, and I looked at his ammo and I said, that ammo isn't going to last. And he says, "Kid, got more line in the lunch line than you got in the business. Don't tell me what's going to last."
Major Dundee, a legend that sweeps across the screen in the blazing battle fire of man-to-man conflict.
And he ran out of ammo the 3rd day of shooting, and he was fired. So, I mean, working for Peckinpah was quite a ride. And the Wild Bunch was quite a ride. I'd like to say that hopefully everyone only has one Bataan death march in their life, and that was mine. There's one story I want to tell that kind of involves LQ and Strother. In the beginning of the Wild Bunch, as a wardrobe man, you got to parade all the people by Sam, and he does yes, no, that sucks, you're ruining my picture, all that stuff. So I had Strother and LQ in front of Sam, and he was giving the old up and down, and you're sitting there quaking in your boots. And he says, "You know, something wrong about Strother. He's all right, he looks right, but give me a 1913 Hell's Angel. That's what I want." So she said, "What the hell is that, man?" So I go, "Come on, let's go back to the trailer." And I take him back to the trailer, and I go in, and he's looking just almost like he looks in the picture. And I had a bunch of nuns' habits in this trailer. and I grabbed one of the crucifixes, and I took it off, and I hit it with first of all, the first thing I did, big mistake in a way, is I took a pair of needle nose pliers, pinged off the Jesus, threw it out of the trailer, wrapped a bullet around it, blowtorched the whole thing, turned around, and an entire Mexican village was looking at me like that.
Sam loved it.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. Wow. Wow. That's a treasure. Oh yeah, put it on.
Oh yeah, put it on.
Yeah.
I ain't no
A
Strother Martin.
1913 Hells Angels and
Steve McQueen as Junior Bonner. He has only one problem: the 20th century.
Joe was such a, he was really at the top of his game.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's interesting is you look back and you go, well, how old was everybody at that time? And McQueen was just about 40, maybe. And my dad and Joe were 5 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next person they hired on the deal was Sam Peckinpah.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe knew that Sam and Steve had a great creative relationship, even if it was a little fractured from the Cincinnati Kid.
Mm-hmm.
Sam signed on right away. He tested my dad. These anecdotes that my dad wrote about in his memoir was that, so they had a great meeting with Steve. Now they have Steve signed. Solar Productions is on board.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe takes a meeting with Sam and my dad. Sam has the script and calls them up, and they're editing Straw Dogs. And they're editing some of the most violent, dramatic scenes of that film. In many ways, Sam was testing my dad, especially, and Joe, are you going to handle watching this rape scene as I'm editing, as they walk in and then, take a break. You want to see what I'm doing, working on? And nobody flinched. And Sam said, I like the script. I want to do it.
So why do you think it failed?
Two reasons. And one of the reasons was both Sam and Steve as businessmen, they both really knew the business. They were pros. They went to ABC and said, it should not be a general release. It should be a short release, small art films that's, in New York and Los Angeles.
To build up the word of mouth and get some reviews.
Exactly. And ABC they knew that they're having success with Cabaret, and that's their big youth movement in television and rock and roll and music. And they said, we're going to do general release.
Boys, times have changed.
You ought to take up another line of work.
Yeah, I'm working on my first million. You're still working on 8 seconds. Rodeo time.
Your dad must have had a wonderful connection with Sam because of Sam's Western heritage.
Most definitely. And there's a lot of serendipity that happens very quickly in how it goes from McQueen and Sam. ABC is signed on. Then they get Ben Johnson, who's up for an Academy Award nomination, or just been awarded.
Just won one for Last Picture Show.
Last Picture Show. And Robert Preston and Ida Lupino sign on. You get Dub Taylor, Joe Don Baker.
Was he great?
You're just some kind of motel cowboy.
And he was a Solar production. This is a little insight that I think is interesting, is that Steve production company had some say in the casting. And rather than taking a full $1 million, he took $800 with $200 on the back end. I mean, he was $1 million actor. He was the highest paid actor in the world. With a $3.65 million budget, between Sam and Steve, they had $1.5 million up front. And Bill had the locations dialed in from front to back. And by the end of the day, Sam said, Jeb, you're not going to dinner with the mayor. You've got notes from me, and you're going to type those notes up. And the fact is Sam had my dad on set the whole summer. And he and Steve and Sam and Joe and Haida, everyone worked together the whole summer together. And Dad was on set the whole summer and was doing notes every night. And so it was a very collaborative immersion of the film crew in Prescott.
Once the film was over and Sam was always involved in what his next project might be, was your dad part of that inner circle of group that hung out with Sam?
They stayed in contact. And actually, he wrote another script for Joe and Sam and Steve, a Western. And I've gone back and read a big interview with Sam in Rolling Stone magazine right after that when they're making The Getaway. And he says, "Oh, I've got 6 pictures lined up. I've got Max Evans, and I got another Western, and I got, I think he was already thinking about Pecker and Billy the Kid." My dad and Sam always remained friends for the rest of his life.